Christopher Bray. The name had been quietly circulating among friends, family, and law enforcement. Whispered with worry, repeated with hope, pinned on boards, and saved in phones as a reminder of someone who had vanished from ordinary life. He was a man in his mid-30s, with plans, routines, and a life that seemed predictable. Until the day it wasn't. The Marshlands had always been silent witnesses to the slow rhythm of the town. Reeds swayed with the wind, water pooled in shallow areas, reflecting the sky, concealing more than it revealed. To anyone passing, it was just landscape, familiar and unremarkable. But on this day, it would hold a secret that had eluded investigators, family, and neighbors alike. Christopher Bray had disappeared without warning. Not with argument, not with note, not with a sign that anything was amiss. His friends remembered a laugh, a text about meeting later in the week, a half-packed lunch for a day out. Ordinary life. And then, suddenly, the absence. Before we go any deeper, if stories like Christopher's resonate with you, if you believe every missing person deserves to be remembered, then you already belong here. This is Adventure for Truth. Subscribe to the channel and stay with us as we uncover the stories that the world almost forgot. It had been a normal morning in his neighborhood. Birds sang. Cars moved along familiar routes. Children played in yards. People went about daily life, unaware that someone they knew, someone they counted on, was slipping quietly from it. Christopher Bray was not just a name on a missing persons report. He was someone's friend, someone's colleague, someone with routines and habits and small joys. He had favorite coffee spots, streets he preferred, and a car that would soon become the center of a mystery. The disappearance began subtly. One moment he was seen walking toward his van, which he used for work. The next, he was gone. No struggle was witnessed, no confrontation recorded, just absence. His family sensed something was wrong almost immediately. Calls went unanswered, texts ignored, plans missed. Ordinary silence stretched into something heavier, a presence felt in absence, a fear that grew sharper with each passing hour. Where was Christopher Bray? The marshlands seemed ordinary from above, calm, quiet, familiar. But they had a rhythm, a capacity to hide, to conceal what human eyes cannot easily see. And for now, that secret lay waiting beneath the reeds, beneath the still water, beyond the notice of anyone searching. Christopher Bray had vanished, and no one knew where to look first. The last confirmed movements of Christopher Bray were ordinary in every detail, yet each one now carried a weight no one could have anticipated. He had left his small apartment that morning with the same routine he followed each day. Keys in hand, briefcase slung over his shoulder, a quick wave to the neighbor he always greeted. His van, parked along the edge of the marshlands for easy access to work sites, was the last point of certainty. Every turn of the ignition, every routine glance in the rearview mirror should have marked continuity. But continuity ended where the marsh began. Friends remembered brief exchanges, a shared joke about a colleague, a text confirming a late afternoon meeting, a reminder about errands. None of it suggested that his day would end in absence. He seemed entirely present, attentive, focused. And yet, in the span of an hour, Christopher Bray disappeared from sight, leaving behind only traces that would seem meaningless until the van was found. The small details that went unnoticed became the threads of tension later. A slightly ajar van door, a coffee cup left on the dash, footprints in mud that disappeared into reeds. Each one, at the time, had seemed inconsequential. Now they loomed as silent markers of a presence that had abruptly ceased. His phone last pinged near the edge of the marshlands, where the water pooled beneath the tangle of reeds. There was no struggle recorded on video, no erratic activity on GPS, no messages that hinted at worry or fear. The ordinary day ended with ordinary appearances, a man walking toward his van, and yet, by mid-morning, that ordinary had vanished. Search efforts began quickly. Police canvassed the area, calling friends and colleagues, retracing every step that could be verified. Volunteers scoured paths that bordered the marsh, scanning water edges, combing reeds, peering into shadows. Yet the marsh, deceptively shallow and still, hid its secrets with ease. Every investigation circled outward from a point that had been, for all practical purposes, the epicenter of the disappearance: the van. Days passed without progress. The marshlands were difficult to navigate, misleading, and treacherous in subtle ways. Currents shifted debris, mud concealed tracks, and the reeds obscured vision. What should have been visible was not. What should have been obvious was invisible. Christopher's absence weighed heavily on his family. Each day without word became a night of silent dread. Friends and co-workers, unable to reconcile the ordinary with the sudden void, repeated patterns of hope, imagining he had simply gone somewhere, delayed, or otherwise safe. But the more ordinary the speculation, the more invisible the truth became. The van remained in the marsh, unclaimed and unseen, waiting for someone to look where no one had thought to look. It was quiet, patient, hidden in plain sight, like the marsh itself, a guardian of a story no one yet knew how to read. Christopher Bray had not left the world. He had only left the narrow lane of perception through which everyone had been searching. And the marsh waited, silently, until it was finally noticed. The investigation into Christopher Bray's disappearance quickly became a study in limits. The limits of human perception, the limits of routine, and the limits of the landscape itself. Police followed the ordinary paths, the streets leading to his apartment, the familiar sidewalks near his office, the local cafes he frequented. Every surveillance camera was checked, every neighbor questioned, every social media post reviewed. But each lead drew a blank. There were no signs of him leaving town, no arguments or threats, no messages hinting at voluntary absence. Each day only reinforced the unsettling reality. Christopher Bray had simply vanished. Search teams turned to the marshlands, the last place his van had been seen. Volunteers waded through reeds, slogged through mud, and called his name over water that reflected sunlight and clouds alike. Boats were deployed, lines stretched across shallow channels, divers attempted to probe areas where the ground fell away into murky depths. And yet, the marsh seemed to resist their scrutiny. Currents shifted silently, reeds concealed, mud swallowed footprints, and every false lead became a distraction. The bridge that connected parts of the marsh was overlooked. From above, it appeared stable, secure, unremarkable. The water beneath it seemed shallow, calm, ordinary. It had been crossed by hundreds of people that week alone, workers, students, joggers, none of whom realized that the van rested beneath, hidden just out of sight. It was easy to assume it wasn't there. It was human nature to see what we expect, and the marsh had taught everyone to expect nothing. Weeks became months. Posters faded on street corners. Phone alerts were dismissed. Tips came in sporadically and went nowhere. Every day that passed added weight to the case, not in clues, but in absence. Christopher's family felt time as a tangible pressure, a slow, relentless tension pressing against hope. Friends despaired quietly, unwilling to confront the growing likelihood that answers would not arrive easily. Investigators revisited the marsh repeatedly. They walked the edges, inspected water levels, noted currents, and studied vegetation patterns. Yet, the van's location remained elusive, almost invisible in the places where logic suggested it should be. Even professional divers, trained for recovery, failed to notice the subtle depression and partial concealment of the vehicle. It was there all along, in plain sight, but hidden in a way that defied expectation. The investigation stalled not from inattention or negligence, but from the marsh itself. Its deceptively ordinary surface, the way shadows and reeds twisted perception, and the small shifts of mud and water all combined to keep the van invisible. Every misstep, every assumption that the vehicle had gone elsewhere, every overlooked angle created the conditions for the secret to persist. Christopher Bray had not wandered far. He had not disappeared into another town, another life. He had been present, hidden by circumstance and landscape. And the marsh remained patient, holding its secret, waiting for the moment when someone would finally see what had been there the whole time. It was nearly a year after Christopher Bray had disappeared when the breakthrough arrived. Quiet, methodical, almost mundane in its appearance, but monumental in its consequences. A team conducting routine environmental monitoring in the marsh had lowered sonar equipment into channels that had previously been considered inaccessible. Their objective was ordinary: check water depths, map sediment shifts, and note the movement of wildlife. But then the equipment pinged something unusual, a shape inconsistent with mud or vegetation. The signal suggested solidity, something heavy, resting against the reeds and waterlogged debris. Divers were called back in, methodical and deliberate. They moved slowly, clearing reeds and probing deeper, careful not to disturb the fragile balance of the marsh. The shape began to resolve. The outline was unmistakable. The roofline of a van, partially submerged, hidden beneath the water and tangled marsh growth. The scene was quiet, deliberate, almost reverent. Authorities did not rush. There were no dramatic shouts. No sirens pierced the marsh's calm. Only the slow, careful confirmation that Christopher Bray's van had been here all along, waiting to be noticed. The family was notified. Their reaction was tempered by years of uncertainty. Grief tempered by hope, deferred, anxiety softened by the relief that there was finally evidence. They approached the marsh quietly, viewing the van, understanding in that moment that the mystery was finally tangible. The vehicle that had held the story of Christopher's disappearance for nearly a year was no longer invisible. Investigators studied the placement and condition of the van. Water currents had shifted it slightly, mud had partially buried the tires, and reeds had woven around the frame, creating a natural camouflage. Previous searches had failed, not due to oversight alone, but because the marsh's ordinary deception had hidden it in plain sight. For the first time, the story could be pieced together. The van's location explained much: why phone pings had ceased, why searches had returned empty, and why the bridge and its surrounding waters had seemed so innocuous. It was not abandonment. It was concealment by circumstance, quiet and patient, crafted by nature itself. Christopher Bray's presence was finally undeniable. The marsh, which had held its secret for months, had delivered it, and with that delivery came clarity. There were no surprises, only answers. The disappearance, the uncertainty, the hours of dread, all were reframed through the simple, immutable fact of what lay beneath the water. The van, the marsh, and the slow revelation became central characters in the story. Not dramatic, not sensational, but undeniable. The secret was out. And in that moment, the investigation transformed from speculation into truth. The van in the marshlands confirmed what had been feared and what had been hoped. Christopher Bray had not vanished into the unknown. He had been here, hidden beneath the water and reeds, silent for nearly a year, patiently waiting for discovery. The truth brought a strange, heavy relief. It did not erase the anxiety, the countless sleepless nights, the uncertainty that had worn on family and friends. But it provided something that absence never could: a tangible answer. The mystery of where he had gone, the haunting question that had lingered in every conversation and every quiet moment, now had a form, a location, a reality that could be faced. Investigators were able to piece together the final movements: how Christopher's van had ended up in the marsh, how currents and mud had concealed it, and why every previous search had overlooked the subtle clues. There was no foul play beyond circumstance, no hidden antagonist, only the quiet, patient concealment of a landscape that had done what it always does: hide, shift, and obscure what it holds. For his family, the recovery offered clarity. It allowed grief to take a proper shape. It gave them the knowledge to finally honor him, to reconcile the months of waiting with the confirmation that he had been present all along. Friends, co-workers, and neighbors found closure in understanding that the absence was not negligence or abandonment, but simply the effect of a hidden world beneath the calm surface of a marsh. Christopher Bray had been missing, but he was no longer unknown. His story, long suspended between hope and despair, had finally reached its quiet resolution. The marsh released its secret, and with it, those who loved him could begin to process what had been lost and what had been found. And for you watching, this is the reason we tell stories like this. Because every disappearance matters. Every search matters. Every life deserves remembrance. If this story moves you, if you believe in truth, in patience, and in honoring the lives that vanish, then you belong here. Subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because the next secret waiting beneath the surface may be the one that changes everything. Don't miss it. Be here when the hidden truths come to light.